The woman in the story is reeling, which we would call spinning. And in this story in Scotland, they call it reeling. So the refrain of the story is, and still she sits, and still she reels, and still she wished for company. The title of the story is The Strange Visitor. An old woman sat by the fire one night, and still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company. And suddenly the door opened, and in walked a pair of broad feet, walked over, sat down by the fire. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, and then the door opened, and in walked a pair of slim shins, walked over, sat down on top of the broad feet. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, and then the door opened. In came a pair of thick knees, walked over, sat down on top of the slim shins. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, and in came a pair of huge hips, sat down on top of the thin thighs, on the thick knees, on the slim shins, on the broad feet. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, and then in came a tiny waist, walked over, sat down on the huge hips. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, and then in came a pair of huge shoulders, sat down on the tiny waist. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company. In came a pair of slim arms, sat down on the broad shoulders. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company. In came a pair of huge hands, sat down on the slim arms, on the broad shoulders, on the tiny waist atop the huge hips, thin thighs, and the thick knees, and the slim shins on the broad feet. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company. And then the door opened, and in came a scrawny neck, walked over, sat down on top of the broad shoulders. Still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company. And then in came a huge head, walked over, sat down on top of the scrawny neck. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company, but why do you have such broad feet? Asked the old woman. From much tramping, said the creature. From much tramping. Well, why do you have such slim shins? And the creature said, in an entirely different voice, from being up late with little food. Well, why do you have such thick knees? From much praying. From much praying. Why do you have such thin thighs? From being up late with little food. Why do you have such huge hips? From much sitting. From much sitting. Why do you have such a tiny waist? From being up late with little food. Well, why do you have such broad shoulders? From much threshing. From much threshing. Why do you have such slim arms? from being up late with little food. Why do you have such huge, huge hands? From much grating, from much grating. Why do you have such a scrawny, scrawny neck? From being up late with little food. Why do you have such a huge, huge head? From much dreaming, from much dreaming. Well, what have you come here for? I come for you! But the old woman was too quick for the creature. She leapt up, grabbed the pail of ashes, dumped them over the creature's head, and the creature began to disappear. First the huge, huge head, then the scrawny, scrawny neck, the broad, broad shoulders, and the slim, slim arms, huge, huge hands, and the tiny, tiny waist, the huge, huge hips, and the thin, thin thighs, thick, thick knees, and the slim, slim shins, until all that was left was a pair of broad, broad feet that slowly walked out the door. And the old woman, set herself back down by the fire. And still she sat, and still she reeled, and still she wished for company.